Hey folks, your OS Reviews. You're watching our video review of the iClever Walknbook. As aforementioned in our unboxing video, this is actually the same tablet as the iRulu Walknbook. It's just been rebranded and there's some slight tweaks in terms of the software, but everything is mostly the same, so you really can't go wrong with either version. They both perform decently for the sub $200 price point. Just like the iRulu variant, this one comes in two colors, either green or orange, and from a design perspective, it really reminds us of a Nokia phone or a Nokia tablet. From its rounded and tapered off corners on the sides to its polycarbonate plastic construction, it feels really substantial, well made, and elegant as far as design, and also very colorful. As far as specifications are concerned, we have a very typical 10.1-inch IPS display with a standard 720p resolution. There is a front-facing camera with a 2-megapixel sensor. Underneath, there is the standard Intel BayTrail quad-core processor clocked at 1.33 gigahertz, coupled with 2 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM and 32 gigabytes of built-in flash storage. I would say that 32 gigs is the bare minimum for you to run a full version of Windows, just because once the installation has been completed and you also have a version of Word included on here, the available free memory isn't that huge. So having the ability to expand it by means of a micro SD card or a full-size USB is really valuable if you want to plan on running legacy apps and games. So otherwise, a very low-cost, low-energy, energy-efficient tablet here with a fairly clean and elegant look. Taking a quick tour of the tablet's design, we can see that on the very top, there's access to stereo speakers. Although the placement isn't as great as being front-facing, they're still fairly loud and nice in terms of watching back videos as well as playing back music. Granted, they're not the most rich-sounding speakers, but on a very slim and lightweight tablet, it suffices. There's also a volume rocker, which is fairly tactile and responsive. Located on the left-hand spine, you'll find access to a power on-off switch, which is easy to tap, as well as a 3.5mm headphone jack, micro HDMI, micro SD, micro USB, full-size USB 2.0, and a proprietary charging port. We're not huge fans of this charging connector, and we think that they could have just used the micro USB, so that's something that we didn't really like about its design. Otherwise, on the very bottom, there is the magnetic attachments for the keyboard, since this is a 2-in-1 transforming tablet. And finally, on the back, you get this very glossy piano black surface, which is made out of plastic, but again looks pretty classy and elegant, in addition to a rear-facing camera with the same resolution as the front. So let's take a quick look at its main user interface here. You have a very typical Windows 10 setup. So if you've used a Windows 10 laptop before, you'll be right at home. The first thing that you'll notice is that the IPS display is bright, vibrant, and saturated. Although they've used a glossy screen, which means that outdoors it doesn't do quite as well since light really glares and reflects on it, indoors the viewing angles are quite spacious and generous, and you get a really great entertainment and productivity experience. Down below here, we have access to your typical time and date information, and all the regular gestures from Windows 10 are carried over, so you can swipe over to see your action center of notifications and get access to quick things such as turning the tablet mode on or off, turning on the rotation sensor, launching VPN, turning on Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, things like that. So turning off tablet mode goes into the more traditional Windows experience, the more legacy experience, where we have this desktop view with your applications that you can customize, and you can look at your drawer in addition to a few shortcuts on the sides. It's not nearly as touch optimized as the tablet mode, so it's nice that you can swap back and forth between the two. As far as preloaded applications are concerned, the Walknbook does a pretty good job of just giving you the bare minimum, since the built-in memory is a little scarce. And that's a good thing, because everything from the web browsing experience to file managing remains really snappy and smooth despite having an entry-level chipset. So we'll take a quick look at some of those things, such as Word Mobile, for instance. So you get this version pre-included in addition to PowerPoint and Excel, makes it a pretty decent productivity experience, especially once you snap it onto the keyboard. So here we have the ability to tap and create new documents as well as create a template. So it makes for a pretty good experience even if you're working or for school purposes. Speaking of the keyboard, again, it attaches magnetically, and you can see here that once I attach it, it automatically gives me a prompt of whether I want to exit tablet mode. And you can see that the mouse and the cursor also appears on screen once I start moving my fingers around. The keyboard itself actually worked a lot better than I expected just from a first glance perspective. The keys themselves are a little bit small, and they're island and chiclet style, which is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but for the most part, you can use it for a few days and you'll probably get used to it and get a fairly accurate and high word per minute count. What I was most impressed about was the trackpad, which uses a multi-touch sensor. It's highly precise and responsive, and the addition of regular left and right shoulder keys instead of being a one-piece click key actually makes it really sensitive and easy to use. So although it isn't a backlit keyboard and the keys are a little bit small, I was overall impressed by how it was designed. Since it is magnetic and it doesn't use wireless Bluetooth technology, you don't have to ever charge the keyboard, and it works basically as you just plug it in. So it's really easy to use and, of course, a great tool for productivity. One critique of this type of design in general, though, is the keyboard still isn't as stable as something like a traditional laptop. As you can see from the back of the tablet, it remains propped up using these magnetic triangular prism that's created by the flaps of the case. And although it's a pretty neat trick and it works well on a table, if you're typing on a lap, maybe if you're on a plane or on a train, it doesn't work nearly as well. It's not quite as stable. But that's one of the general trade-offs for getting a 2-in-1 detachable tablet. Some of the general logistics and performance of the tablet, it's what you'd expect from a BayTrail quad-core chip, which is to say a lot better than the older Intel Atom chips that we saw in netbooks maybe 5-6 years ago. These are actually really zippy and they work great for web browsing, for watching and streaming videos. Not as great for gaming purposes, but as long as you keep your expectations modest, they definitely perform in a way that's similar to entry-level Chromebooks and slightly better, in my opinion, than entry-level Android tablets. So we can see here that we have Microsoft Edge as the default web browser. Edge is still not my favorite browser compared to Chrome, but it is more energy efficient and seems to be a bit more optimized for a lower end chipset. So if we tap out of this, we can take a look at the virtual on-screen keyboard, very typical for a Windows-based tablet, and it's actually very spacious and easy to type on. So we can go to somewhere like YouTube and check that out. You can see we have the standard kind of MSN page loaded by default, and you can see that the touchscreen display is very responsive, surprisingly so, gestures where you can easily maneuver, slide around, and again, it's basically a regular computer experience packed in a tablet form factor, so you do get a pretty comfortable experience there. So again, let's try loading up YouTube and see how it fares with something such as video, for instance. And we're loading. So again, this is what a regular video looks like, a good chance to also show off the speakers. You're watching our video review of the Ficom Passion 660. The smartphone actually wins our Editor's Choice Award for the month of August. I think it's a perfect balance between usability, performance, and also style. It sells for roughly 300 euros, and it's the current flagship for Ficom, which is a manufacturer that really just started showing up in Europe as well as here in the States recently, and the Germany branch was only launched in 2010, so they are pretty new at this game. And you can hear that the speaker quality is actually, again, pretty good. It's a little bit tinny, but it does get quite loud, and the placement isn't obstructed by your fingers, which is always nice. You can toggle pretty easily between resolutions. We're currently on, it looks like 720p, which is good enough for the display here, and it does a very adequate job. So you can imagine how watching movies, streaming movies, everything like that works without any problems. Of course, the place where a Windows tablet really shines is in legacy apps. Essentially, if you have any software that you have lying around, you can plug it in, install it. You can even insert a USB-based DVD driver and install it that way. So even though it's not recommended for extensive, let's say, photo editing or video editing, those software can be installed and run on here, as opposed to a very optimized, a light version or just a missing version of software if you're looking at a mobile solution like iOS or Android. So that's one of the benefits here. We have the Microsoft Store, which gives us a nice growing selection of more mobile-oriented apps as well. So you still have access to some pretty popular titles and games. So if you're worried about that, you do have those available as well. And of course, there are more and more interface updates that makes the experience seem very streamlined and more tablet and finger-friendly, such as this news feed by Microsoft that really reminds us of Flipboard. And you can see everything consolidated into one place, and you can customize it as well. And of course, reading is a great experience on here. Text remains really legible, clear, images are quite vivid, and as long as you're in a decent lighting environment, it works quite well. So if we change some of the brightness controls over here, this is as bright as it gets, and we can turn it on all the way to a better experience if you are reading at night, for instance. So not the brightest screen in the world, but it does work and pretty decent for the price point that we're talking about. Otherwise, again, the 2 gigabytes of RAM on here is what really limits you from running more complex games. So it's not meant for a heavy productivity load, but as long as, again, your expectations are moderate, it actually works a lot better than expected, because you would think with a lot of Android phones these days, mid-end phones having 2 gigabytes of RAM, that this wouldn't run very well. But everything from the main interface to just handling regular apps is super smooth and fluid. Multitasking with just a few apps open with a few tabs in the browser still works just really well. So Windows 10 is truly optimized for running on slightly lower hardware, and with tablets, it makes for a very compelling option, especially if you're considering that a full licensed version of Windows 10 can cost you, a few $100s. The fact that this tablet is sub $200 and gives you a very good experience already for a entry-level tablet, I think that you'll be pleased here. I like the overall 10-inch form factor. I think it makes sense. It makes it easy to both work and play, and of course, with phones getting larger and larger, it also makes sense to get a slightly larger form factor compared to 8 or 7 inches. The last feature we'll take a look at is its camera. Again, it's not huge in megapixel count, but actually works pretty well since it's autofocus. In better lit environments, you can actually get fairly focused shots, and you can play around with the main interface here. This is just the regular camera app from Microsoft, and you can also swap into the front-facing camera, which actually does a pretty decent job as well for video conferencing purposes, for Skype calls. It's very bright and shows your face in a pretty good lit environment without any problems. And you can also play around with things like filters, ISO, auto balance, autofocus, things like that, and record video at 720p resolution as well. I can then tap on here to look at the images I've just taken, edit them. Of course, if I have more extensive software installed, I can edit it even further, zoom in, and it just makes for a very decent camera experience if you are looking for a camera, although it really isn't the main focus of a tablet like this. I think that the main takeaway of the iClever Walknbook is that it's really built well and works a lot better than I expected, especially from a company that you might not have heard of here in the States. Really, with this type of software and this type of hardware, regardless of really the manufacturer that you're looking at, performance is about the same, whether it's an entry-level HP Stream device or if it's by Toshiba or by iClever or iRulu. Really, with the optimized Windows software on top, it runs smoothly, and for basic entertainment and web browsing and productivity, it really works quite well. Battery life is also quite decent. It has a 7,500 milliamp hour capacity pack, which lasted us around 6 hours of continuous usage, which is great. And this is a fanless computer, so there's no noise in the background, and it remains pretty cool in operation as well. Very well built, and surprisingly for a plastic construction, the polycarbonate frame just feels substantial and doesn't creak or cringe when you're using it, and everything as a package pretty much makes sense if you're looking for a tablet 2-in-1. You can check out more details about the iClever Walknbook, and of course, more elements borrowed from our review of the iRulu variant. But for now, this has been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. This has been our video review.